I'll let you know when we're live. Okay, we're live.
Thank you. So, hi everyone. Welcome to the Wikimedia Research Showcase for October 2022. Back after a break in August due to the Wikimedia conference, and in September due to our team offsite, the first in-person offsite of the team in 3 years. My name is Pablo Aragon, and I'm a research scientist at the Wikimedia Foundation. I'm very excited with our showcase today because October 2022 marks the 10th anniversary of the launch of Wikidata. In 10 years, this project has become the largest community-driven free knowledge graph in the world, creating a common knowledge base for Wikimedia projects. And to celebrate such an important anniversary and to learn more about the amazing work done in 10 years for Wikidata, and also the research challenges in there of artificial intelligence and machine learning, the research team, we have decided to make this showcase a panel with established researchers and practitioners in this field. So in the room, we have Lydia Pintscher, product manager for Wikidata at Wikimedia Deutschland, Elena Simperl, professor of computer science at King's College London, Katherine Thornton, information scientist at the Yale University Library, and Markus Krötzsch, professor for knowledge-based systems at the Technical University of Dresden, and also main developer of Semantic Media Wiki. And every panel requires a moderator. So we are very happy. We are actually honored to have Denny Vrandečić, head of special projects for the Astro Wikipedia project at the Wikimedia Foundation, and also main developer of Semantic Media Wiki and co-founder of Wikidata. At the end of the panel, we'll have time for Q&A. If you have questions for the panelists, please put them in the YouTube chat or on IRC. Today, my colleague Diego Saiz-Trumper will monitor and relay them here. And with this, I will stop talking. Happy birthday, Wikidata, and I pass it on to Denny.
Thank you so much. Indeed, happy birthday, Wikidata. Just to clarify, I haven't been touching the Semantic Media Wiki code base for more than a decade. So original developer would fit much better than main developer. And I think Markus would also make the same claim, roughly. I don't know if you ever touched the code recently. So we're preparing a few questions that I would like to hear. We're still in the research panel, so we're focusing on the research around Wikidata. And the first question I would like to ask the panelists is, now that Wikidata is 10 years old, we have seen actually a lot of research around Wikidata in its first decade, which is really amazing. It's making me super happy that so many people are interested in Wikidata, are using it for research, and are researching the Wikidata community and the project. What are some of the more surprising research results, or some research results you wish more people would know about related to Wikidata? I'm sending this question first to Elena.
Thank you, Denny. It's a pleasure to be here. I think for me, one of the most interesting work that has been done in this space is the work by Claudia Müller-Birn and I think Markus Lukács. They were among the first to have looked at the Wikidata community and have analyzed how that community evolved over time and compared and contrasted that history with other online communities and identified the number of what I would call participation patterns, which I think were quite influential, at least for other researchers in this space and in social computing, to understand perhaps more about what motivates editors and how one could increase participation. Another interesting piece of work that I remember was on vandalism detection. I find the whole area of how people contribute to something and why extremely fascinating. To draw from the work that my team has been doing, I think we are doing a lot of empirical work where we're actually very excited to just look at what is happening and try to observe this ecosystem without disrupting it. I was I wasn't entirely surprised, but perhaps I was surprised by the actual details when you look at the language distribution in Wikidata. Now, this is work that we have done a few years back, but it was still some of the results and the distributions weren't entirely what I would have expected based on say Wikipedia or other communities. What other work would I want to see or know about? So by training, I'm a knowledge engineer, and just like Denny, and I don't know if Markus, you would call yourself a knowledge engineer, maybe a logician. But in knowledge engineer, we're very passionate about the structure, the backbone of any knowledge base. And Wikidata is super interesting from this point of view because it has a very flexible backbone. And a few years back, we started looking at it and just trying to think about what is the equivalent of an ontology in this knowledge graph, and then to be able to ask all those questions that we were researching when we were young and doing our PhDs. And we didn't get that far, not because it wasn't interesting, but because of the sheer scale of that ontology. So if anyone ever wants to revisit some of those classical questions around the patterns of design or even the evaluation of that artifact from an ontological point of view, reach out and I'd love to chat. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Kat?
Okay, the first paper that came to mind when I heard this question is a paper called The Enslaved Dataset, a real-world complex ontology alignment benchmark using Wikibase. And I'm interested in this paper because not only does it have interesting analysis of how the team undertook their ontology alignment, but it's also a really wonderful introduction to Wikibase from a team that created one of the earliest Wikibases in the Wikibase ecosystem. And it has excellent background information about the Wikibase ecosystem in general. So I think that one would be a great read for anyone who is interested in setting up their own Wikibase or is curious about one group's experience working with that. And then the other one is Scholia and scientometrics with Wikidata. And the reason that I'm going to talk about this paper is kind of a meta reason. So not only is it an interesting paper on its own, but I would recommend that anybody who might be in the audience interested in keeping up with research about Wikidata, if you go to the Scholia page about Wikidata itself, you can get a really wonderful overview of who has been doing research about Wikidata, what topics are they looking at in relation to Wikidata, where are they publishing papers about Wikidata, and who's working together in different collaborations. So that's a great place to get an overview. And then you can even subscribe to an RSS feed from Scholia about Wikidata as a topic, and then you can stay up to date, you know, if you're into RSS feeds with recent research on Wikidata. I found it to be really helpful. And the reason that I'm suggesting that paper is I think that the Scholia project in general is, I find it to be a really heartwarming collaboration because of how it started as a conversation at one of the early wiki sites, and then it grew into a one-person created application that Finn was just working on independently. And then, you know, Scholia looked so great, even just with one person working on the development, that it attracted a whole fan base and other people to help Finn work on the development. And I think it's a really nice story of a group of really highly motivated Wikidata people working together to build something that provides value, not just to the Wikidata community internally, but also provides a lot of value to other people. You know, some institutions use Scholia as a source of data to show their researcher profiles as an institution. And this is taking the place of paid subscription services to other companies. So for institutions that don't have the budget to pay for something like that, you know, Scholia is really delivering a lot of value for those organizations. So yeah, those are the two papers that came to mind for this question. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Lydia.
Yeah, I want to take us a bit away from research about Wikidata to research that's using Wikidata's data. And I thought it was really cool. It was published just the other day, but been worked on for quite a while. It's work by Ömer Yalçın on elite networks. So he looked at how are the elites of different countries in the world connected to each other. So is the prime minister, for example, putting his sister into a high position in a ministry, and or stuff like that, or in religious positions, military positions, and so on. And he's trying to understand how democratic forms of government and autocratic forms of government differ in these networks. And I thought this is super cool, because he was talking about how before Wikidata, there was no data set that he could use for that work, because previous data sets were all focused on either one country or one area of the elite. So for example, military. And Wikidata is the place where he found both of these together, right, for all countries in the world across all different sectors. And basically that enabled his research. And I thought this was really cool. And I love that Wikidata makes that possible. And to the question of what kind of research would I want to see more, that type of research, like using this treasure that we have to learn something new about the world that we didn't before. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Markus.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be on this discussion. Yeah, I think we've heard quite a few good examples, and I would also agree when I think of Wikidata themed research, I mostly think about the research where people have used the data to make a connection that you couldn't otherwise make, like figuring out where a person was born and then finding biases in the distribution geographically and so on. So making these links and following these paths, this is just great, and this is what knowledge graphs should be enabling. But when you ask me what I find surprising about the last 10 years of Wikidata related research, then I would answer that there was so little of it. I mean, there could be so much more. When we started this and dreamt of free knowledge graphs of this scope, we were thinking of this as an enabler for research. And somehow this was already in the area. So people were using data sets like DBpedia, Yago, Freebase to do research. And we thought that, well, by making this an official project, by boosting this in scope and quality, it would enable even more research of this kind. But now if I look at papers today, they use Freebase 15K as their evaluation data set. So this is a small excerpt of a discontinued knowledge graph that is no longer up to date, but it's still used in some communities as the main benchmark for their research. So somehow I was actually very surprised and a bit disappointed that some research communities are so conservative about how they evaluate their work, and also so uninterested in actually moving on with the application and rather trying to optimize for their own communities. And actually just there are many reasons why this might happen. Yeah, so this is scale is a topic. It was brought up. It is really hard to handle Wikidata. It's not a simple data set, but this is reality. Yeah, it's not simple, and people prefer simplicity over accuracy, it seems. But there are also other reasons. Only 2 weeks ago, we had a talk by a guest researcher who is an expert in knowledge graph embeddings and has done many works there. And I asked her, why don't you use Wikidata instead of what you use? And her answer surprised me. She said, well, we think our methods wouldn't be of much use on Wikidata because its quality is too high. We want to show how to detect errors and find improvements. And we find this more in other data sets than in Wikidata. So you see here this kind of perverted incentives that somehow play in some research communities and that are completely understandable. But I think this is something that one should address more. And I still dream that somehow Wikidata will become even more important in the future in how it's used in research.
Thank you, very much agree. Does anyone want to comment on something that someone said? Then I continue.
I can comment on this at the next as an answer to the next question, because I think it fits quite nicely.
So one of the big shifts in the last decade or two has been to increasingly large machine learned models to do, well, basically anything. Many people, even within the field, but certainly outside, see the project of creating and maintaining a large knowledge base, such as Wikidata, as being unaligned, if not, contradictory to the goal of having a to the goals of the machine learning community. What are your thoughts on the relationship between the two? How can Wikidata make AI better? What is the role of Wikidata in AI applications? What is the role of Wikidata in this world of machine learning research? There's a lot of controversy around AI. Can Wikidata maybe help with fixing some of that? Or what are your thoughts? Elena, no, sorry, Kat first this time.
Okay, I think one challenge people might have in integrating subsets of Wikidata in their research that might be using other techniques from machine learning or AI is identifying a subset that is going to be relevant for their research quickly and understanding how to extract that subset. So one idea would be if those subsets were pre-extracted periodically and made available somewhere for people to grab, that could be one way of addressing that. And then, of course, shout out to the Wikidata's e-namespace, the schema namespace, that if more people describe useful subsets of Wikidata with a schema and then publish that schema in the schema namespace, I think that would be another strategy to help raise the awareness of, it is true that you really have to do some extensive SPARQL querying to make sure that the subset that you're interested in is as complete as Wikidata can provide data for you. And sometimes that isn't just a single SPARQL query, like the first query you think of. Sometimes you have to really explore around because people may be using different data models to structure things that sometimes can mean the same thing. So knowing that that is a challenge, when people find really interesting subsets, we should be able to reuse those subsets more easily.
That's a very interesting point. I also enjoyed the work on Wikidata dumper in this regard of getting sets out of Wikidata. Markus?
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, this is, we also identified this and we tried to help with it, but even finding a solution is difficult. And I think the dumper at some point stopped working because this data was too large for the cloud instance it was running on. Right. So the question was about machine learning and Wikidata. So I think some part of the question sounded a bit as if there is a conflict between the two, but I actually think there is none. I mean, in the end, Wikidata is technologically very open, and my first answer to the question would simply be, bring it on. Yeah, if you have a great thing to do with machine learning, just show it and integrate it, and there's a place for it probably. But on the other hand, I also don't perceive machine learning as a competitor in any way towards the project of Wikidata, simply because, well, frankly, I don't know of any knowledge graphs generated by machine learning that would claim to compete with Wikidata in any way. I mean, there have been some automatically created and curated knowledge graphs. I mentioned some, Yago, DBpedia, also other projects like as a knowledge vault was of this type. But if you look at their technology, they don't even use that much machine learning or none at all. They are information extraction projects. So they are mainly about converting formats. They take knowledge which has already been curated by a community and then put it into another format, try to extract the formal bits. But what formal bits are of interest, what kind of knowledge we want to look for in the first place, these things are usually still decided by somebody. Yeah, so there's no machine intelligence doing that for us. And I think this is a huge fundamental aspect that one understands when looking into the community chat, for example, in Wikidata. The questions discussed there are not how can I enter more data more quickly? What tool could help me with that? People don't work as data entry workers all day long, but when they curate as a community Wikidata, they are building a knowledge base. They are working out what conceptual model they should use of the world and how the world can fit into that model. And this is a very complicated process that requires a lot of discussion. Which properties are the right ones to use? How many entities do you need to have for one thing that you see as an object in the world, or maybe as several, depending on whom you ask? And these discussions about how we want to view the world, this cannot be done by a machine learned model or by any computer program. This is where we have the human interface, and that's why it's a knowledge base. Knowledge is about human understanding, and it's about communicating with humans. And if you take the human out of this, you may still get an interesting data set, but it's not, I think, in my view, a knowledge base. So this conceptual understanding that bridges to how we view the world, and is specifically interesting in Wikidata because it's international and language independent. So we somehow have to agree even across many cultural backgrounds. I think this is just something you cannot replace. And I would even say conversely, this is an effort that when done properly and when conducted with care can provide a basis for many things that machine learning needs and lacks at the moment. So if you look at machine learning, it is looking for explanation, for trustworthiness, for reliability, for somehow conveying to human beings what it actually does and why they should trust it. But if you want to convey anything to human beings, you need to make this connection between the data, which is just data, and the human understanding. And I think knowledge bases like Wikidata are exactly the kind of projects that you need in order to move this forward.
Thank you. Good point. Lydia.
Yeah, plus 1,000 to what Markus said. And I'm thinking about it, and when we talk about these new large language models, for example, a lot of that is built on a huge amount of data and trying to learn from it, right? And it all depends on having a huge amount of data. But there's so much important stuff and so much interesting stuff and that isn't available as a ton of data. I'm thinking about stuff that's just underrepresented on the internet, or current knowledge. Like if you ask one of them who is the president of a country, they might have the one from 10 years ago still, because that's what the big data has, right? And I think there's definitely a place for Wikidata to be an addition to that and an augmentation to that, to let more people influence what kind of data is available there and provide more timely and targeted interventions for stuff that people think really matters and that you cannot learn easily just from a huge amount of data.
Thank you. Elena?
Well, and because I'm at the end and because many wise things have already been said, I'll try to just unpack the question. If I think about the machine learning community, going back to what Markus was saying about not having more, not seeing more use of Wikidata in some parts of research. If I think about the academic machine learning community, and they are very much aware about these developments as well. There is a lot of work that is being done in improving the performance of algorithms against certain benchmarks. And these benchmarks are established in certain communities. And there's also at the same time the perception that creating new data sets is not as glamorous as doing the model work, and people, including my PhD students, for instance, sort of stay away from it. Say the first thing that people look when they decide, that's my feeling sometimes, is there a data set for it? And if they find it, and then they continue. And then it can happen at some point that someone starts asking some interesting questions about the quality of that data set or how it was created and so on and so forth. But that doesn't really happen, right? So I also read recently, I think it was in the Communication of the ACM, an article quite disturbing that was saying, was looking at data sets that are referenced in various communities in the machine learning community. And it was this super steep long tail distribution with, I think there were something like low 5 figures in terms of total number of data sets and less than 100 that were actually used. So once a data set is sort of established in a community, then the way the community works and the incentives work make it quite hard to change it. And I think if we want Wikidata if we think that it would be a valuable resource for the machine learning community, then it's worth considering how to publish some of the data in a way that makes it easy for that community to work with it. And I'm talking about libraries of embeddings and things like that, rather than Sparkle or even regular dumps. Now, if we're thinking about the machine learning community in the private sector, I think there, I would imagine they are using every single data that they can get their hands on, right? And we know of various machine learning initiatives in all over the world, some of the most advanced ones that are using Wikidata. So I don't see it as a competition at all. And I also agree with Markus that there's this whole area of explainability where knowledge graphs are expected to provide a solution. And I think Wikidata does much more than that, because I am not convinced that just having a knowledge base, like a bunch of triples, can actually convince someone to trust the predictions of an algorithm. But I think what Wikidata has, it has a full, basically a footprint of how that knowledge came about. Of the provenance of that, and that's almost non-existent in most other knowledge graphs or data sets that are used for explainability, because even if they have, say, a data sheet or something like that, it can capture only that much. Whereas here, there is access to that whole ecosystem, which could perhaps provide additional context to gain trust.
Thank you so much. Want to ask again, anyone has a comment on something that one of the other panelists said?
If I may, yeah, I agree with Elena. Actually, an interesting point about this overuse of single data sets is that I think even the machine learning community is realizing quite well that this is happening. And I recently, in a machine learning themed paper, read the notion of a community-wide overfitting, that by somehow always using the same data set, even if you hold back part of the data set for your training, you are still taking it into account implicitly because of the way you build your algorithms. And so it's no longer useful for validation. And I think in a way, machine learning has the methodological understanding necessary to fix this. Yeah, so I'm always hopeful that they will overcome it.
Thank you. One point I would also wanted to mention, Markus was saying you don't really see them in competition, but I do think that there are people who think, like, for example, that a large language model can do everything that a knowledge base can do, just like embedded internally. So, for example, if you think about the question answering, whatever, if a knowledge graph, you would just take an LLM and, well, it has knowledge internally somewhere in its parameters.
Okay. So how about we do the following, because that would be quite interesting, right? So how about we sample some queries? We need to sample them properly. We translate them in natural language. We take T5, the T5s of this world and the GPT-3s and whatnot, and we ask the questions, so then again the graph, and let's just look at the answers. I mean, that's someone's master thesis right there. And then we know, because I think what Lydia was saying about what factual knowledge that is quickly out of date. I'm thinking football results. I'm thinking, I mean, yes, in the UK, you can say that the Prime Minister and other key politicians are changing quite quickly at the moment, but lots of factual knowledge that is changing regularly. I think you'd find a lot of examples, but my feeling is that even if we would look in parts of the graph that is more static, we would still find lots of examples where it just makes sense to ask a curated collection of facts rather than rely on statistical patterns from a large collection of unstructured sources.
Yeah, I totally agree. This leads also to my next question, actually. So, as you know, there are a lot of research questions in the world, and even though some of you are really prolific and very active researchers, you cannot tackle all of them. There is research about Wikidata, but also there's research which has been facilitated with Wikidata, but is ultimately about some other domain. What kind of research would you like to see done more? As Elena was already starting to plan out some master theses here. So what other kind of research would you like to see more? What research questions or research programs would you like to see be tackled in the second decade of Wikidata? Which way would you point younger researchers who are interested in Wikidata in using it or in researching it? Markus.
Yes, thanks. Actually, I think many things come to mind, but something which I particularly am interested in is the question of proper modeling in a higher or more abstract or more general sense. Yeah. So when sometimes people say, okay, Wikipedia, that's informal knowledge, and Wikidata, that's formal knowledge. Okay. But I think this is not really capturing the truth. In reality, there is a spectrum between completely informal, unstructured, and vague things over things maybe in web tables that you can easily extract, to something which is more structured and has connections that you can easily crawl, but still contains assumptions and implicit background knowledge that you need to make sense of this. And maybe all the way until some super formalized logical theory in psych or whatever. Yeah. And so this is a spectrum, and Wikipedia is somewhere on that spectrum with all the info boxes and templates. It's not completely unstructured, and Wikidata is somewhere on that spectrum. And I think one insight that I had in the last 10 years, looking just how the project develops and what the data looks like, is that we are not as far on the formal end as I would have imagined us to be. If you look at the statements in Wikidata, they make a lot of sense to humans. But if you try to interpret them in a completely regular and methodological way with a program, you often notice that you interpret them wrongly, because clearly the quantifier or qualifier in a certain statement can't be meant like this or like that. Yeah, so many of the statements also maybe due to the complicated structure that they still allow still are somewhat like small sentences, yeah, that we can somehow interpret, and it's not fully formalized what they actually mean. Yeah. And so what I think is somehow is necessary and should be done in research is to try to come up with better models, or computer actionable models of what Wikidata actually means. Yeah. So for example, you have a complex host of spatio-temporal knowledge there. If you just look at the countries that Berlin was in over the years, yeah. It was, as you certainly know, if you are good Wikidaticians, is that Berlin has not been in any country for some 40 years of its history, which has good reasons and cannot be modeled differently. Yes, so there is an interval of time when something is allocated like this or like that, and of course, all the entities are also geographically located in some place. So cities are in countries or in states, and they are in countries and so on. So if you just look at this small piece of historical and geographical information, this would lead to a complex world model that somehow can be either consistent and meaningful or contradictory and error prone. Yeah, it could be that something is in two countries at once, or that the time when it was there overlaps with the time when it was here. And so you could imagine to have a formal interpretation of what this means. But so far, all we use, all we have is we collect these facts, yeah. And to make something of the facts, to interpret them in a bigger context is left to whatever use case we want to have, so the user in the end. And so space and time is one example of that. Another example could be is the source, is the information, where something comes from, the credibility. This can be, statements can be contradictory, but no longer if you understand that they have different sources and so on. Again, there are no good models for that. So I think a lot more work could really be done in understanding what is formally meant, or what one should make of certain statements. I think other statements, just to add to this, are quite frankly ontological. So they are not. I mean, we think of it as data, but the statements are very much general rules about how the world is composed. And sometimes it's again not clear what they mean. I think I recently read that the universe contains objects of type astronomical object. So what does that actually mean? It's a relationship between an entity and a class of objects. Does it mean that it contains all objects of this type or some? And does it only contain objects of this type, or can it also contain other objects? So it's a statement that has a potential of having a clear meaning that can be calculated with, that can be used to implement smart behavior. But without further analysis and further research, I think we are not there yet. Yeah. So that would be interesting.
Thank you. That's a great research program. I would immediately sign up for that. Lydia.
Yeah, I can actually add to what Markus said, but from the other side. So I think Wikidata was built, and especially the data model in Wikidata was built with this idea in mind that the world is complex and that we don't just have one truth that we want to put into one statement. Instead, we have things like conflicting statements, we have qualifiers, we have ranks, we have references, all of that. And at the same time, a lot of the technology we use every day is decomplexifying the world. And by that, I mean, it's showing us a very simplified view of the world very often. So when you, for example, look at a map in popular map providers for certain politically disputed territories, then depending on where you access it from, it will show you different borders and stuff like that, right? And I don't think that is healthy for us as a society. I think it's actually fairly harmful if we don't show people that there are conflicting opinions about certain topics, but just reinforce that that view they have and teach them that this is the view. So I think Wikidata can play a role in enabling builders of technology to show more of that complexity. And the research question in this direction, I think, would be, how can we incentivize that, right? Because there are reasons why it's not happening now. what can we do to change that? And I think Markus touched on one angle of why that's not happening, because it's hard. I'm pretty sure there's another angle of, yeah, we want to make the world simple, but yeah, I would be super interested in figuring out how to change that dynamic.
Great point, thank you. Elena.
So there's a bunch of things that I would like to do, but they might be just interesting for me. I think definitely what Lydia was saying about that diversity resonates with me. Also, looking back 10 years ago, Denny and I wrote this one research grant in which we were naively assuming that just because we're going to allow people to express different opinions, and we were just throwing around topics like filter bubbles and whatnot. This was like 2009-ish, 10-ish, and we're talking about this, and we're saying, well, is it okay that the search results look like this, and is it okay that we're asking everyone to agree? And we sort of were scratching the surface, and then we sort of moved on, and the reality caught up with us big time. Having said that, I had recently the opportunity to learn a bit more about misinformation and disinformation, and how it travels, and what happens once inaccurate, not to say fake, information makes it into the public realm, and what sort of tools we have, both as researchers and as responsible citizens or digital platforms to deal with it. And I'd be very interesting to sort of apply some of those insights, which are super interdisciplinary, to think about what else to do in terms of mechanisms to add data, to comment on it, to use it once it is published, to actually have a tangible effect on misinformation and disinformation. And that requires many things. It requires also many other actors to be involved in this. But I find this fascinating. So that's one area. I don't know if I would even have something very interesting to say in such a research program, but it's for me, it would be absolutely fascinating. Then the other program would be around explainable and trustworthy AI. So sort of along the lines that I have mentioned earlier, around the idea that having an understanding of where the data comes from, and how it was created, and what its creators think about it, and potentially also how it is used in other places, makes Wikidata such a unique resource, not alongside its size and the fact that it's a knowledge graph rather than just a bland CSV. It makes it a really unique resource, I think, to try out some other types of explainability concepts. And I'm talking about being able to provide contrastive explanations, being able to provide context and provenance, and perhaps establishing better mechanisms for trust. For trust, not just to gain trust, but also to maintain and to repair trust as well. I have people tend to be okay with imperfect algorithms if they have an understanding of how and when they make errors, and if there's a way to correct that. And I think because of how Wikidata works, there's perhaps a way to have a more immediate link into it, to create that feedback loop that allows people to work with the data and see perhaps results in how the algorithm works. And then, I mean, I have all sorts of pet projects where I'm thinking about, well, how do I, because we're going back to ontology engineering and how we were building things. So we were building things with essentially data entry forms and with editors. And that's great. But when I look around me, there's so much other technology out there that part of me thinks, well, how would that work with speech interfaces, and what sort of knowledge could one add, and what would it be if so I'm thinking about all sorts of modalities to add data, to enter data, to look at a picture in a museum and see something and then automatically add it to, I mean, a bit far-fetched, but perhaps a bit more interesting than your common knowledge base editor. So those would be some of the areas. I mean, I have a few more, but I think I'll let some of the other colleagues comment on what I said or add to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think all researchers would always have a list of stuff that others should work on. Kat.
I would love to see more research about the ecosystem of Wikibases. I find that there are so many Wikibase instances being set up that I don't even have overview of all of the ones that are out there. And of course, there's the Wikibase registry where you can enter information about your Wikibase so that others can discover it more easily. But there are still many Wikibases that aren't in the Wikibase registry. I would love to know about how people are using those Wikibases, how they are connecting those Wikibases, what data they're putting into their own Wikibase with data in Wikidata, and how that's going. And then I would really like to understand more about how data from Wikidata is being used in other applications and what pipelines people have set up to reuse parts of Wikidata in their own applications, where I know that there are countless numbers of applications that reuse data from Wikidata, but I don't know what they all are. And if people don't write about them, then you kind of just have to either encounter them or hear somebody talking about them. And I feel like I don't have a really great overview sense of the complexity of what I'm sure is happening out there. And then I would love to see more research into how people can collaborate around schemas, and how people are currently using Wikidata's schema namespace, and what additional features people are still needing in order to more effectively work with schemas in Wikidata. And I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That rolls right into the next session. You've been all really good at keeping time. Thank you so much. So we can go for our bonus question. And this is, so the Wikimedia Foundation. Oh, I see Elena's hand.
Yeah, I forgot what I wanted to say. Yes, hold on. So I forgot about this when I was talking, but essentially it's like, without being too critical and with my other hat on, where I work mostly with public administrations and tell them how to publish their data so that others can use it in all sorts of contexts. What Kat said is absolutely fascinating. And if you ever want to work on this, I'd love to do an analysis just on understanding those usage patterns and perhaps also come up with some guidance on how, because at the moment the whole process is very much publishing centric, which is fine, and there's reasons for that, rather than being, okay, here's a user, what does this user typically want, and the answer is not Sparkle. I mean, Sparkle is nice, but it's not. If we want, I don't know, the Office of National Statistics of a country to use Wikidata, they will be looking for certain means of access. And I'm not saying that to critique anyone. I'm just saying that this is a fascinating area of research, and I'd love to look more into it. Thank you.
Markus, hand is also up.
Yeah, I don't want to leave this question without having even, I think there's so much more to do. We all had some interesting ideas, but then when you start talking about research, there's always more ideas coming up. So one thing that I noticed is, okay, how do people edit this is closely tied to my proposal of saying what is actually the model underlying this. So I could perfectly imagine that once you understand, for example, that there's a historical mapping information or historical geographic information, that you suddenly would want to edit this in a completely different way, where you can just drag around, you know, cities in time and in space to make them belong to some other place, and it would be so much more efficient. I mean, in some way, Magnus Manske is just doing so much great work in producing interfaces that make it more efficient to work with the data, but still one has the need to go to Wikidata to do edits sometimes to make a fix, and it feels so slow. Everything is one click and then an edit and another edit. And so what I would dream of is to have some kind of integrated user experience that more in a stronger way embodies how we view the knowledge that we have there, and not just atomizes everything into statements, but lets us make changes more quickly, see inconsistencies less locally, and fix them, make everything coherent, consistent. Yeah, so I'm a logician. I dream of a consistent worldview. So this is one thing, and there's so much to do there. Let me add two more things. One thing I think is also that could be interesting for people who do data analysis, maybe network analysis, is to gain a better understanding how Wikidata actually is not one knowledge graph, but an overlay of many. Yeah, so there's many different sub-Wikidatas that have different laws and dynamics and different distributions. There are road networks in there, there are small world graphs in there, and they are somehow all combined. And disentangling this, understanding better what is normal in one area and what is normal in the other, this could be exciting. And then, of course, let us not forget, it's sometimes less exciting when you have all these interesting social aspects with humans involved, but of course, there are also so many interesting engineering questions for people who like to do things that run fast and scale high. I mean, we need to extract the subsets that we were mentioning. Somebody has to come up with a pipeline that actually works as Wikidata grows bigger. And it would actually also be nice if somebody could make sure that we can still have Sparkle query answering in 10 years from now on the growing data set. We are reaching scalability limits there. And it seems I'm not sure if researchers are a research team as such wouldn't be in the position to write a new graph database on their own. But still, it is very important that also for people in the database community and in related high performance computing communities maybe are looking into this and helping us to solve the problems that we have there on a purely engineering level. Yeah, so lots of master's theses, lots of PhD theses around.
Yes, please, if there's someone out there who knows how to keep our Sparkle endpoint running, contact Lydia, contact the foundation. We have people who are thinking very hard about keeping those alive. Perfect. I still go for the bonus question, but I'll ask you to keep it a bit shorter if possible. So the Wikimedia Foundation, as you know, has a very small research team, which is doing brilliant work. Shout out to Leila for leading that team. And because it's so small, its most important mission really is to enable external researchers to effectively work on research questions about and around Wikidata, Wikipedia, and the other Wikimedia projects in the whole movement, actually. Is there something that you as a researcher would like to see the foundation or Wikimedia Deutschland or the movement do in order to make research into and with Wikidata easier and more effective? I'm giving this question first to Lydia.
Right. Answering this not from the researcher perspective, but from the perspective of the person who benefits from the research. I would, and I don't know if this is something necessarily the research team needs to do, but I would love for someone to do more work on translating all these fantastic research insights that people have into, okay, what does this mean for the development of Wikidata? What does this mean for an editor on Wikidata? How can that influence our day-to-day work? because that is sometimes very hard, both because you might not know that that research is happening, or because it's just hard to understand what someone was doing there and how that can at some point translate into day-to-day work and changing how we do things. Yeah, so I would, if someone were to do that, that would be fantastic.
That's a great point. Elena.
So I think, I mean, in a way, it would, many things are right. Yeah. And I think this sort of forum that is happening regularly and many other initiatives like this and speaking like a researcher as part of this community, I think it's already a friendly and supportive ecosystem, and I'd like to thank Lydia and Emily and many others for our discussions and for how they've inspired myself and my team and encouraged my students, and they've been very, very patient with us all this time. So that is so important. I don't think we should take that for granted. And it's already a really great place to start. I think talking about other things that I think it would be useful to have ways to share more data, perhaps with the researchers, where that's, I know it is a pain, and there's ways to make it painless, and there's reasons why certain data cannot be shared more widely. At the same time, a lot of interesting research can only happen on data that will never make it in the public domain, and it's at least useful to think about reasonable ways to do that and fund that as well. I think the other question is about data and tools. So if we are looking even going back to machine learning and how Wikidata is used in natural language processing, and so having better toolkits or supporting existing researchers who build such toolkits outside of the direct research team of the Wikimedia Foundation, and promoting those tools, I think would make everyone's job easier, because for us as academics, it is quite hard to find the resources to build those tools, because there's only, it's not really, it's more development work rather than publications, and we're sort of, I mean, there's only that many teams in the world that have the resources to invest in such big tool projects, and even they have to prioritize. So now, if I'm thinking about those tools, immediately in the back of my mind, I'm thinking all these other communities that are perhaps not computer scientists and come perhaps from digital humanities or from sociology, or all that research that Lydia found fascinating. Or they are perhaps in other parts of the world where you don't have that sort of infrastructure that we have. So I think investing and supporting and promoting better tools to work with that data would be a huge boost.
Thank you. I see Leila is listening intently. Kat, what would you like to see?
I would love to know if the foundation has any interest in doing more research about the trajectory and the pathways of people who try out editing Wikidata and then leave. And why are, what experiences are people having that then they turn away from the community rather than continuing to edit and contribute. And also for people who reuse data from Wikidata, but who do not become contributors or editors themselves. Not that everybody who reuses data needs to become a contributor for sure, but are there things that we as a community need to work on in order to enable people to see themselves as editors and contributors and see a pathway to becoming a Wikidatan? I would love to see research about what people report and if they have any experiences that may have been alienating.
Thank you. Yeah, that's, I think it's very important. Markus.
Yes, so first I would like to reinforce what Elena said, that we are already in a situation where we have very good support. I mean, if you look at other data sets that are widely used in research communities, there's no support for the data set. It's just somewhere people download it and that's it. Of course, they are not as complex, but with Wikimedia, there is a organized and professional support team to do any kind of research endeavors with. So there is somebody who will answer requests, first of all. There's also a large amount of infrastructure that is readily available and documented, and with community support. There is the incredible resource of the Sparkle endpoint. I mean, for all the research projects and the students, when I give some Wikidata related topic to a student, I mean, they just use Sparkle and they fetch something with their Python scripts, and then they have a list and make it into a dictionary they can use for their tool and so on. So it's so easy to get this, much easier than with most other things I can think of. So keeping this up is already a huge service to the community, I think. And the other thing is that I was starting this panel discussion mentioning incentives of researchers. Why are they not using it more? Yeah? And I think that part of it is reputation and also a certain amount of community pull. So you see research, unfortunately, one has to admit, is a lot about advertisement. And people in research advertise sometimes very aggressively for their solution, for their data set, for their benchmark, whatever. And Wikidata doesn't do any of this. So you see that people who are seriously looking for the best data that they can get because they want to achieve something, they often end up with Wikidata anyway. But researchers that they are looking at their peers and asking what will they like to see when they review my work. And so maybe there is a way. I'm not saying I have a good recipe, but maybe there is a way to even more actively promote Wikidata related research so that it gains visibility and acceptance. And I think, for example, the Wikidata newsletter, the weekly, is already great at that. The smallest Wikidata related paper is being featured there, and that is often interesting to see. And so this gives extra exposition and visibility to these papers. But of course, in a forum, in a channel, which is not super relevant for researchers, few people who read this newsletter will then go and cite the paper because of that. So maybe there are other outlets where Wikidata related research newsletter could be posted into communities that is somehow visible and makes this research more prominent or encourages people in a stronger way. Yeah. So that would be an interesting thing to achieve.
If I may quickly add something to this, and I know we would want to probably move on. And this may be different from country to country, but at least in the UK, we are very much encouraged to think about the impact of our work, and to provide evidence that the work is cited outside academia. So we're explicitly evaluated against this with panels asking, what did this paper do besides citations? I don't care about citations. So having this sort of forum is actually, and the newsletters and everything is very useful. And also that's an incentive for us to work with data sets that matter. just because there is that chance to have an impact. So it's perhaps different from community to community, from country to country, but at least for us, it's becoming a very big deal, and a lot of funding that universities, at least in the UK, receive is tied to that ability to write a convincing impact narrative, and this sort of support that we're receiving here is actually quite useful. But just sorry, and I'm talking too much. The one thing that could be done really, if we really want Wikidata to be used in machine learning circles, is, maybe you're doing this already, is to reach out to the challenges people, and just see, okay, how do we, what sort of data sets could one offer potentially, or explicitly fund someone who would take some part of Wikidata and turn it into, I don't know, a fact-checking data set of some sort, and then talk to the challenge owners to include it there, because that's what most researchers in those communities pay attention to, those data sets. And okay, sorry, I'll let other people talk now.
Thank you. No, thank you for your addition. I'd like to let Leila quickly give an opportunity to check particularly these questions, now that you heard what the researchers would like to hear, to see if you have something to answer or to add to this one.
Yeah, thank you so much, Denny, and thanks everyone for this conversation. It's super energizing and amazing, and my heart is warm with all these conversations and the support that you provide to one another and to the Wikidata community and the work that we do together. By no means I mean to say that I have answer to every suggestion that was mentioned in this last part of the showcase. But I'll share with you some kind of initial reactions, and hopefully these are going to be points that we can pick up together as we move forward from here. Lydia, you mentioned the need for translating insights from research to help, for example, editors on the ground or the Wikidata developer teams or other developers who are working on Wikidata, and I am absolutely with you. This is something that actually within the research team we have discussed in the past in the context of not necessarily Wikidata, but there are other products or other initiatives that can also benefit from this kind of work. And one of the challenges that we have is that it is difficult for a researcher to just look at the research insights or the research findings and infer what needs to be on the ground without working closely with the communities who are actually working on the grounds, because otherwise the recommendations can be too theoretical or detached from the reality. So what I've seen personally working better is when we have a researcher working closely with these communities or specific people. And I welcome you in this particular case. You have at least like some strong bridges and connections to our team. So I welcome you to continue those conversations with us. And if there are particular insights that, for example, on the developer front or development front you need support with, please at least let us know. My commitment to you is that we will continue to consider prioritizing work towards Wikidata where we can within the research team. Elena, you shared the wonderful point that Markus also underlined later, that let us not take for granted the amazing community that supports one another. It's beautiful to see, and it's an honor to be part of for me personally. So thank you so much to all of you for making that community happen. I will say there were multiple ideas that came up about data sets, benchmarks. I'll say that the Wikimedia Research Fund is now open. The deadline is December 16. I'll say that the cap for the research fund is a humble cap of we're asking for 2 to 50K basically proposals. So these are not like gigantic proposals necessarily, depending on where you're applying from all over the world. But I do encourage you publishing data sets that can enable others to do research or raise awareness about the projects are within the scope of research funds. I will not sign up myself for giving the thumbs up necessarily without seeing the proposal, but I will invite you to apply. And I will also say that Elena is one of the 2 technical co-chairs for this year's research fund. So not signing up Elena for giving the thumbs up either, but we would like to receive your proposal. So please do that. And then there's the technology fund for developing tools that can come later in the fiscal year. So please keep an eye on that for tools. Kat, I will say you asked about foundation interest in the trajectory of people for editing Wikidata. I will say Wikimedia Foundation generally have interest in this space. The research team, of course, us being researchers, we are always interested in this space. I think this is something that is more closely related to Lydia and Wikimedia Deutschland and the Wikidata community. So I leave some of this for creating some bridges for you all to continue that conversation there. And yeah, Markus, I think you had some really nice points on the engineering front that I'll make sure I'll pass on to the tech folks on our end. Thank you so much for all of those.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Leila. Diego was monitoring YouTube, IRC, the other channels where we have. So I hear there are some questions from the community. Let's hear those.
Yes. There are especially comments, not a direct question, I would say, but there are a lot of enthusiasm for wiki-based research. Also, there are people talking about federation possibilities. I don't know. It's kind of a general comment about +1 for federation possibilities. There was a question about if there's plans to add more computing power and models to ODES related with Wikidata. Maybe Lydia can talk about that a bit. And there's also one comment about that Markus said that the formalization was missing, and Jan, that made the question, was wondering if he thinks that we can get there at some point, if that complete formalization would be possible at some point. I think that's the most direct question that we have so far.
Thank you so much. Lydia, do you want to pick up on
On which one? The ORS question or the formalization question? Okay. So Diego is actually also a good person to talk about this. But yes, indeed, ORS right now is used for several things inside Wikimedia, but on Wikidata for 2 things. One is figuring out if an edit is potential vandalism or not, and one to figure out how high quality an item is or how low quality an item is, to give us a sense of overall how high quality is the data in Wikidata and not. And of course, quality is very subjective in this part. It's very hard for a machine learning system like ours to figure this out. And kind of the same for vandalism. But there's a lot of great work going on at the Wikimedia Foundation around migrating these systems to a new infrastructure and improving them significantly. So my hope is that with all the work that's going on there, we will actually have a much better tool at hand to tell us if an edit on Wikidata is likely to be vandalism or not than we have right now. Because it is hard, right? The changes on Wikidata are usually small, and trying to learn how which of those are vandalism and which are not is not an easy task, but we can at least get much closer than we are right now with that. And I think that's a very crucial tool for us to help scale Wikidata, in the sense that vandalism fighting is such an important task, but with the many edits going on Wikidata every day, it's very hard to find the ones that really need attention. And a machine learning tool can definitely help there.
Thank you. Since you mentioned Diego, is there something you would like to add to Lydia's answer?
We are currently working on having these new models. There's a fabricator task for the ones that are more interested to know how we are doing there. These new models would try to address the 2 use cases that Lydia is mentioning. So we hope that in the close future we will have something to show. So probably in few research showcase we can discuss more in detail there. But the research is ongoing, and we are super happy to collaborate from the research team with Wikidata, because working with Wikidata for us as researchers is always a pleasure after so long time working with structured data. So I think probably we will have a new model soon that could try to address some of the main issues. That one of them is especially the vandalism on labels and descriptions. This is one of the largest problems that we are working on. So hopefully we'll have something to show very soon.
That sounds very exciting. The second question was addressed towards Markus about the formalization. Markus.
Right. So the question was, will there ever be a complete formalization? No. I mean, this is what Gödel told us already. So this will not work. It's not even mathematically a goal we should aim for. But mathematics aside, I think it's also not something we are aiming for when we have a knowledge base, because this is exactly, the task of a knowledge base is exactly to make the bridge between the human understanding and the computable world, which helps us to do things faster and smarter. I mean, computers are smarter and faster than us, that's clear, but they don't understand in the end, they have to serve us. So they have to have some understanding of how we see the world. And this bridge is our task. And I think formalization is not about, having captured it all and then we can just all go offline and the computers will do the work for us. But it's rather making computers do something useful for us, understanding where we made errors, understanding what things, for example, are vandalism, because of things which are contexts that are bigger than the single statement or bigger than just the constraint. So I think this is important. And I think this notion of having everything automated, everything extracted from the data, this is, I'm not sure if it's still modern. It used to be a hype 5 years ago. And I think people are waking up to the idea that it's maybe not such a good thing to have just the algorithm determine what is true and what is not true on social media, for example. But somehow this is beyond mathematical properties or statistical properties. That's something that has to be in the reality that we live in. And so I think in a way, Wikimedia as a whole, not just Wikidata, is the counter model to this. The idea that we need to talk. We still need to talk together. We have to agree. We have to model together. We have to exchange ideas and then try to build something where we can all live with. I think this is a really important thing to take forward and to, in a way, to not aim for total formalization only, but always to keep the human in the loop and the human communication in the loop.
Thank you so much for raising this and for formulating it so beautiful. I fully agree. I think the goals of the Wikimedia movement is to give a space for all of us, for the whole world, basically, to contribute to the sum of our knowledge, and not just a place where you can find it, but also where everyone can have their voice and be shared in, as long as they have internet access and can access the projects of the foundation. Thank you so much. Is there something someone wants to add or raise at this point? If not, I have one last question. Where I would like to see quick going around, like one sense. Oh, I see from Pablo a hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I have one question, Jerome. So, thanks everyone for the contributions that you have done today in the panel. Now that the fight against misinformation and disinformation has emerged as one of the main challenges of our society, I'm wondering, like, from your expertise, what are the values and strengths that you would like to highlight from the model of Wikidata, and what future world will be interesting in this space?
Elena?
Yes, so I think going back to what I was saying earlier, I think there's a piece there around thinking what to do beyond accepting conflicting views, and that may mean providing other types of tools for developers to consume that data purely from an engineering point of view. But actually, I think what it also means is thinking about interaction mechanisms for that information to be displayed and communicated. There's one thing to, I don't know, ask Siri about a certain fact that may be controversial, and Siri says, well, there's a few opinions about this, and it might be A and it might be B. So that's the baseline. That's fair enough as a starting point. But is that all that we can do? Or could we perhaps ask the user for some feedback? Could we provide some context so that at least that those different perspectives are taken into account in a more substantial way, rather than just as it happens immediately discarded? So I think there's something there. I think also, and I mean, in another life, Pablo and I were on this European program called Media Futures, which is going brilliantly, but we do miss you. So we are working with artists, and because we are out of technology-centric ideas for how to tackle misinformation and disinformation, and there's, so now we have sort of like 30, almost 40 projects, which gives you enough of a collection to sort of see what are the patterns that people are trying to that artists and very highly interdisciplinary teams think about. And I think part of that is they are creating these experiences for people with different point of views to sort of socially interact first before they actually start consuming any sort of information. I find that extremely fascinating as a way to frame that consumption of knowledge.
Thank you, Elena. Actually, now we're working on trying to connect Wikimedia research with a community of developers. And now I'm wondering why I haven't thought yet on how to connect with artists to try to make some interventions through Wikimedia content. Yeah, good idea.
Thank you. Lydia?
Yeah, this whole topic of misinformation, disinformation, and everything related to it, I think is super interesting. And I think we need to be careful not to take Wikidata for granted and as a very good thing in that picture. But we need to realize that it takes contributions from a lot of amazing people to keep it that way. And I think as Wikidata becomes more central and more integrated in a lot of the day-to-day technology that we use, the incentives to change that also increase, right? So that's definitely an invitation for everyone to think about how you can contribute, be it as a researcher or as something else, to preserve that and to make sure that that continues to be a great resource for good information.
Okay, thank you so much. So now I come to my summary question. What is the one thing you want editors or researchers to know? Elena.
Right. Yes, so the following. I am absolutely petrified that in 5-10 years, we are going to see AI technology of some sort used much more widely in public services and in the public realm in general. So I don't know, I'm talking about elevators, something very, very basic that we all use on. And I'm really worried that we don't have data sets to make sure that these services will work for everyone. And because we don't. I mean, we don't have data sets, good data sets in many languages for certain types of imagery in certain parts of the world. I mean, it's frightening. And there's some work that is trying to collect these data sets and with the right level of scrutiny and so on. But I think the technology is moving much faster than we are going to be able to publish these data sets. So I wonder what the role of Wikidata could be in reducing some of these inequalities. I don't think it's a Wikidata task alone, by no means, but there's a very powerful ecosystem here, motivated people. There's lots of things that speak for Wikidata playing some central role in driving this, because it could get really bad.
Thank you. Yes, very true. Kat?
So this comment is directed at editors. I often have the experience that I come across something that I want to add to Wikidata, but maybe I'm in a rush, or I'm in the middle of doing other work, and I perceive it as a change in task to do all of the research to find out the best way to model this item. So let's say that it's like a fossil taxon or something, and I don't normally edit taxons. And so of course I can write a few Sparkle queries, check out how other fossil taxons have been modeled, and then add it that way. But I want to let everybody know, who hasn't already seen it, that in Wikidata's schema namespace, you can find already established schemas that basically encode data models for different types of knowledge in Wikidata, and that you can find those data models there. And then you can also extend or update those models, just like any other area of the wiki. And that the potential for collaborative data modeling using the schemas across languages is really exciting to me. And it's something that a lot of editors aren't familiar with yet. And so I would love for additional editors to know about the schema namespace.
Thank you. Yes, another shout out to the schema namespace. Markus.
Yes, to the researchers. You need to learn from Wikimedia and from its communities more. There's one thing that is written there like a big sentence set in stone, and this is be bold. Yes, so this is the one credo of Wikimedia editing, that actually, when I was starting, I mean, in my last year as a master's student, I would say Wikipedia was a big new thing, right? And it was fascinating and thrilling to be part of this. And this was the one thing that impressed me at the time, that they said, be bold, just do it. If you think you know how to do it, go and do it. And this was what we had in mind when we got started, and we came together in Karlsruhe back in the days, thinking about how to change Wikipedia to add some structured knowledge. And this was what has carried us and strengthened us. So I think if I look today at research, many times I find they are just far too fearful. Yeah, research is not about just having a career. It's about doing something risky, to aim high and to really make a difference. So go for it and surprise us.
Be bold. Thank you. There's so much I could add to that one. Lydia.
Right. Definitely be bold is a great thing. But looking back at those 10 years, for me, a great demonstration of this time is relative, right? Because on the one hand, it feels like it was yesterday, and at the same time, oh my God, 1 decade. That's mind-blowing. So I think for the audience, I think we've achieved something truly amazing in those 10 years. And I would love to invite you all, if you are not already, to be a part of the many coming years and be a part of that.
Thank you. Yes, join the Wikidata community, join us all, and join also the 10-year celebration events for the birthday, which are coming very soon. And you can find everything on that on the Wikidata website. Thank you all so much. I want to give Pablo I want to give over to Pablo to close the session. But thank you all for being here, and thank you all for your insights and your answers. It was really, really, truly appreciated.
Yeah, and I thank everyone for joining the Wikimedia Research Showcase today and this lively discussion, as lively as Wikidata, that today got its 100 million item earlier today. So it's also a double celebration. I would like to especially thank today to Denny, Lydia, Elena, Kat, and Markus for their contributions, and to my colleagues Diego and Emerald for their support with the Q&A and audio video. Before closing this showcase, I would like to recall something that Leila also mentioned, like the second edition of the Wikimedia Research Fund was launched some weeks ago, and we are accepting proposals until December 16. So please, you can check the details on Meta for the call, and feel welcome to attend our office hours if feedback is needed. The next showcase in November will be about Wikipedia and academic libraries. So looking forward to seeing you all there. And again, happy birthday, Wikidata.
Happy birthday. Goodbye.